All right, party people. I think this is working now. We had a little trouble going live on Facebook, so Dawn should be popping in here. Oh, here she is.
I am here.
She is here. Okay, I think it's working now. I don't know what happened. Hopefully people will figure out that we're here and not at the one that hasn't started yet. I wonder maybe if I can go put a note on that one real quick. Okay, I think it's working now. I don't know what happened. I hear myself on your computer.
I turned you off. I just turned you off. Okay.
I don't like it. All right, I'm going to just go drop a note on that other so that people will know.
Yeah, I put a note up that said we would be live soon, but.
Okay.
Oh, Kate's here. They found us.
Okay. Let me get off the Facebook so we don't have echoes. Hi, guys. Okay. Sorry. We had a little trouble. I don't know why, but we use StreamYard, and for some reason it did not want to go live on Facebook today. So we were just talking to each other for a little bit, but I think we got it all figured out. So hello.
But we're here.
You missed the music today.
Yes, we didn't get to.
I can still pop it up if you want, but it's probably OBE at this point. Okay, so big announcements. Brooke won our bundle. She got all the Better, Faster, Dear Writer, QuickBooks, whatever we're calling them, the QuickBooks bundle,
Sure.
Something like that, because she subscribed to our newsletter in January. So there is a new giveaway for February. If you are already a subscriber, you don't have to do anything. You're already entered. And we're going to be giving away in honor of Valentine's Day, although technically we're still in January, so maybe we shouldn't even announce it until next week. But it did go out in the newsletter.
I think we should announce it. It's
yeah,
not a secret.
So we're giving away a book we talk about all the time, Romancing the Beat by Gwen Hayes. And since we're talking all about romance next month, not just next week, we figured that would be a good thing to give away.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, that's going to be fun. I'm excited about talking all about romance. We're going to have some opportunities for our people who watch to share a little bit about their romance. So
about their romance, you mean like what they write or their actual romance?
Their actual romance.
Well, it's going to get interesting.
So, if you want to start making something up now, that's great. But that's next month. First, we're going to wrap up this series.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, we're talking about goal setting and honoring your process today. And I'm having trouble doing that myself because, as you guys know, I entered that NYC Midnight Short Story Challenge, which I like to enter every year, and then sometimes actually go ahead and write the story. I just like to pay them the money to register, and then sometimes I don't even bother. But
I'm sure they appreciate that. I'm sure they're like,
oh, good, Delancey Stewart's here again. Love it when she pays us and doesn't actually enter. I mentioned, though, to my smallest person that I was doing this, and he found it very intriguing. And so he actually kind of, I wouldn't say plotted, because I'm really running into a lot of problems writing it because it has no plot. But he was the one who originated a lot of the ideas for my thriller that I'm writing, which is actually a comedy. So
that's
I also think
interesting.
If I do turn it in, it has no chance of actually, they'll look at it and be like, this is not a thriller. It's a thrilling
But
comedy.
That's fun for him, I'm sure, to get to help and feel like he was a part of it and all of that.
I think he's super frustrated with me, though, because he got up yesterday morning. He's like, did you finish it? And I was like, I had some trouble. I had to delete a bunch of stuff. And he was like, what? And then this morning he was like, did you finish it? And I was like, I didn't even work on it this morning. And he was like, what? And I was like, I think we're getting really close to the deadline. This just may not happen. And he was like, you're
such a disappointment.
I know. It's only 2,500 words, but I'm like, I don't know how it ends. That's the problem. And he's like, well, I already told you how it ends. I'm like, right, but it actually has to have like a plot.
I have to get there. Yes, yeah. I have to get there.
It has to make sense. His story does not. But I will give away one little part because this is what made me be like, okay, yeah, we have to write this. Do you know that dating, because one of the things is a matchmaker that I have to write about. You know that dating site that you see in magazines? It's called It's Just Lunch. Have you ever seen ads for that?
No, but okay.
Maybe it's just a San Diego thing. I don't know. I feel like I saw it in airline magazines when we used to like be allowed to travel. But there's this company called It's Just Lunch. And it's like, the idea is that you don't want to commit to a dinner date and you don't really have that much time. You're a busy professional. And so you just meet them for lunch and then you go from there. And they like set you up with, it's a matchmaker. So he was like, there should be one called It's Only a Snack. And I was like, that's a fantastic idea. They'll be in competition with It's Just Lunch. And he was like, and they could have shaggin' wagons. And I was like, why do you know what that means? And he was like, I kind of don't, but so that's, if the snack goes well, then there's a shaggin' wagon parked at the curb, just in case. If they decide it should be more than just a snack.
That's awesome. I totally want to read the story.
Now make it into a thriller.
Yeah.
So that's where we're running into some trouble.
So clearly, after the couple meets for It's Just Lunch, they decide
it's
to
only
move.
a snack.
It's only a snack. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to mention the competitor.
There is another competitor. It's merely brunch.
So they decide to move things to the shaggin' wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And there's got to be a dead body in there, right? I mean,
the shaggin' wagons are blowing up. That's the problem.
Nice. See, yeah.
Mm-hmm. But that's about all we've got.
Julie has a comment for you.
It could be an afternoon delight. If it's an afternoon snack, it might be a morning delight because I have a snack in the morning, don't you? I mean,
could be a midnight snack.
You never know. Yeah.
That sets up a whole new dynamic for you.
Yeah. So does that count as our funny story for today?
I think that counts as our funny story for today. I think we could make a whole show out of that, but we should probably.
I would love it if we could, because then maybe I'll actually finish the story and have a chance of turning it in. Although they're going to look at it and be like, this is not a thriller. It's funny, but. And my husband is like, I don't think other people will think that's funny. He goes, you have a very specific sense of humor. And I was like,
we thought it was funny.
Okay.
I think he clearly just doesn't understand romance writers or thriller writers, because we have a twisted sense of humor sometimes.
This is the man who now every single time I wake up in the morning, like we get up really early because he goes to the gym and I usually write. And when he hears my alarm go off, if he's already awake, he leans over and goes, love that chicken from Popeyes. I don't know why. It's driving me insane. He does it almost every single day at like 5 o'clock in the morning. I hate him. And my life is crap right now because of it.
Now, I see where that can turn into a thriller really quick.
I should tell him that.
What happened to Nancy's husband?
He loved that chicken.
Nobody knows. He loved that chicken too much.
And then when I'm mad, he'll be like, you don't love that chicken. I'm like, I don't think I love you.
Right. If it's a choice between the two, I'm going with the crispy goodness right now. So.
Kidding. All right. Well, we have wasted almost 10 minutes not talking about anything related to writing. So.
Yes. Thank y'all for coming and hanging out with us. We are going to talk about honoring your process. And so let's talk about that. Let's start there. So this is where we are channeling our inner Becca Syme. If you're familiar with Becca's Write Better, Faster Academy, she is a huge proponent. We've had her on the show of you have to honor your process. You have to figure out what works for you when you're trying to write. So maybe brainstorming with a under 12-year-old.
He's 11. Yeah.
It's okay. Is maybe not the best for your process. It's probably great.
It's a process.
It's a process.
It's not my usual process.
So you have to find what works for you. And so this week I wrote the blog post about honoring your process, and then we'll get to yours in a second about the realistic goals.
Julie thinks my husband has it coming.
Yeah, we could go down a whole rabbit hole with that too. So I was comparing honoring your process to making tacos, because everybody makes them a little bit different. You can put different kinds of meat in there, different kind of spices. Everybody has their own little style, and you have to find what works for you.
On the back of the packet, it specifically says a pound of ground beef, quarter cup of water. There's really no deviating from that. So,
but there is. You're allowed to do that. There is no taco police that shows up and says you didn't put enough onion in there.
Yes, this is true.
Yes.
You make fancier tacos than I do. That's all.
Yeah, mine don't come from a package.
Mine don't anymore because I keep forgetting to buy the package. It turns out you can make the spices on your own. I didn't know that before.
And so when you're looking at that, it's the same thing as there is no writing process police. If you like to edit as you go, no one is going to show up on your door and be like, we hear that you're revising instead of just pouring out the rough draft. Whatever works for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so dangerous too, especially for newer writers, because they really they're looking for guidance. And so they buy into these, oh, okay, I have to write every single day of my life if I want to be a real writer. And I can't edit as I go. I just have to pump out a rough draft and it's supposed to be awful and terrible. And nobody's ever, I can't show that one to anyone. So if you end up being a writer who A, doesn't write every day, B, turns out a beautiful first draft because you've gone back and revised as you went along and it's clean and gorgeous. And then you're like, wow, okay, what am I supposed to do now? I guess I need a second draft. Like, how do you do that? So That is not your process then.
Yes. And it's okay to try to improve your process. Like, it's okay to look at what somebody else is doing and think, okay, I'm going to try that. If it doesn't work for you, you just let that go. And that is all right. Because I can tell you, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I can tell you right now, I can give you 3 different examples of clients that I'm working with right now. One of them turns out very clean, pretty much already done first drafts because she has to edit as she goes. She has to. If she doesn't, it bothers her. She can't get past the spot that she's at. Her mind the whole time is going, there was a problem in chapter 2. We ain't going to chapter 7. Sorry. We're just going to sit here and stare until you go fix that problem in chapter 2.
Yep.
So there's that. I have another client who, and this is a little bit more of like, I get rough drafts that don't even have punctuation. Like there's just scenes of people talking, and then there's a little tidbit of description, and then there's a little bit more tidbit. Now this is story coaching. This isn't developmental editing. And so when we're doing the story coaching, I read a couple of this and a couple of that. And I'm like, okay, I think this is what you're going to do here. I think that looks good. This scene I'm not even messing with until I have some idea what it's talking about. But she's just spitting things out as they come into her brain.
Mm-hmm. That terrifies me, but okay.
And then you have the people who are in between. And those are the ones that you have your basic beats. You kind of know where you're going. It's okay if the story takes a left and you're like, oh, I'm in a brand new spot now. This is okay. It's all right that I'm now making chicken tacos instead of beef tacos. That's going to be all right. But you've got to find what works for you, because out of those people that I'm mentioning, if any of them tried the other person's process, it would be a disaster.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely true. And story coaching is interesting as a writer because I haven't done a ton of it. Dawn does most of the story level stuff. I do a little bit of story coaching, and I'm working with another writer right now that I really admire, and we share kind of similar audiences, and we've just known each other for a really long time too. So I think we just kind of get each other, but it's very interesting watching her process and kind of being on the inside of it because it's really different than mine. Like on its face, it's very similar. We both kind of revise as we go. We write linear. We, figure out certain things before we start. But she like really struggled through the very beginning. Whereas for me, like I always feel like the beginning is the easy part. But and I think I understand her point. I'm not sure that this will ever work for me, but she's like, I kind of like have to get out the first few chapters. And then I almost know that I'm going to totally rewrite them because I don't know my characters yet. I'm like, they're not talking to me yet. I have to get to like chapter 6 before they start talking to me. And then I can go back and rewrite chapters 1 through 5, which sounds awful to me. Like, I just want it done. I don't want to rewrite it, but it makes sense. It's just interesting how even someone who you think probably has the same process as you totally does not have the same process as you.
Well, and you have to look at what's made you feel successful. And we all know that little feeling as a writer that you're like, oh, yeah, this is working. Let's keep going with this. And so you have to look at what's makes you feel successful. Does it make you feel successful to keep doing that first chapter until it is perfect and then you move on to the next chapter? Or does it make you feel successful of, I wrote 10,000 words in 3 hours. I'm only going to keep like 2,000 of them, but they're all there and I can sort through what I need later.
Well, and you also have to think about what Why did you start writing in the first place? And are you being true to that? Is it still fun? Is it still scratching whatever itch you jumped into this whole messy situation in the first place because of? And if you're making yourself do stuff that makes it so that it's not fun anymore, or that it doesn't feel authentic to you, then it's not going to work. It's not going to work anyway.
Right. Well, and back when I was actually writing instead of editing, I was a total pantser, which sounds a little strange since I'm kind of obsessed with story structure. And when I'm working with story clients, I will break down, okay, this is your 10%, this is your midpoint, this is, and so I took this class on story structure and how to use it and all that kind of stuff. And I wrote this beautiful, it was so pretty outline of the story that I was going to write. And I had all my beats and I had all my little subplots and everything was going to be great. And then I opened up a fresh document and I wrote a completely different story. Mm-hmm. And when I got done, I went back and looked at my outline and I was like, oh, well, that one would have been interesting too.
I do that too.
But the problem I had was after I had written all of that out, I felt like I had already told the story. And
right.
So I didn't want to tell that one anymore.
Yeah.
I want to tell a new one. Mm-hmm. Now, some people, not getting the story beats down and not knowing exactly what they have outlined is like getting into the car in a brand new place and being like, I'm going to go to the store with no GPS. And they feel like they're just driving in circles and they're looking for something they can't find. Yeah. So you have to, like you said, what still feels right? What still feels good? Are you being true to why you started doing all of this in the first place?
Yeah, definitely. Well, so that kind of leads to goals, I think, because whether you solidify them or not, when you first decide you're going to write something, you have a goal in your head. It may not be something that you can exactly articulate, but I encourage you to do that because, I mean, yes, it's fun and you want to explore your passion and, you know, all of that. Writing is an art, etc. But if you are writing for publication, and we can just separate that. If you're writing for fun, you're probably not on listening to us talk about this anyway. So we'll just sort of assume that we're all writing for eventual publication. So I think you really have to decide what are your goals in terms of publication, because there's a few different paths you can take and they really change the way you do things, or they probably will. So the obvious one, I guess, is indie versus traditional, right? So
right. And you have to look at, when you're going to set your goals on that, you have to look at the pros and cons of each of those and your own personality. Yeah. And so I know you've done both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And for a while, I think traditional felt, you kind of have to look at the reasons for your goals. I think I've talked about this before. I wanted to publish traditionally because I had always, I mean, I'm older. If you're 25, you probably don't have the same mindset that I did when I was 25 because the publishing world has changed so much. But yes. In my head, in order to be a real writer, I needed an agent and a real book contract, and someone else telling me I was good enough and that you made it. And so I felt like I needed the acknowledgement of those gatekeepers. And so that was what I was after. That was why I started writing, even though I actually indie published first. Is that true? Yeah, that's true.
Your story.
It is true. I indie published a very bad book, but at the same time that I got the first contract. But so what I found out about myself, and I do everything 3 times before I learn the lesson, and it usually repeat my mistakes several times. And that's why I think my career is a very slow climb. But what I found is that I really prefer having the control, and especially creatively being able, if I want to change my mind and go write paranormal because I feel like it, I can do that. If I had a contract that said I have to write 4 books in this series over here that artistically I feel like I'm done with, it doesn't matter. I still have to go write those 4 books. And I didn't like that. And I didn't like how long it took for everything to happen. And the fact that like I would turn stuff in and then it would be months before I would hear like, oh, we didn't like this, or, whatever, or here's your cover. I don't like it. Oh, well, you know,
it's already chosen. You're good.
Yeah. So you got to figure out what kind of person you are and what sorts of things you want control over and what sorts of things you don't. There was a point after I think I indie published the first book, I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't want to do this. I want someone else to handle all that stuff. But I was wrong.
Well, and you have to look at too time, because traditional publishing is very slow. Indie publishing, of course, you can do it very, very quickly. There's also kind of the expectation that you are going to publish very quickly with indie publishing, especially in romance, that you're publishing one right after the other. So there's a time investment. There's also the monetary investment, because indie publishing, when it is done on the scale that will get you a career, it does involve investing in that career.
Yeah. Well, and from a time perspective too, I think it's a direct trade-off. If you traditionally publish, and I promise this is not what this entire episode will be about, but if you go traditional, yes, you invest a ton of time just in waiting for the stuff to happen. But in the meantime, you're free to go live your life and, write your next book and work your normal day job or whatever you're doing. If you're indie publishing, you're going to spend the same amount of time, but it's going to be intensive at your desk, figuring stuff out, learning about ads, learning about, graphic design and teasers and making covers and how to do a promo and all of the things, because all of a sudden you're a one-man or one-woman show and you either hire people to do it or you do it yourself and you want to do it right. So it is a huge time investment.
Yeah. You either do it yourself or you create a team. I have several clients that they have us, and then they have a cover designer, and then they have somebody who does PR for them, and then they have somebody who runs their social media. And so they're running a small business basically.
Yeah, basically. So yeah. And I think a lot of writers, despite how popular indie is, I think a lot of writers are not super prepared for that reality. So
keeping that in mind,
yeah,
that's what you got to look at when we're talking about goals. So you wrote a great blog post called Eat the Elephant.
Oh, right.
I loved.
Is that a saying or no?
Yes, absolutely. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Yes.
Okay, good. I thought it was. I should have looked it up, but
I knew exactly what you were talking about.
Good. I thought so. Yeah. So it makes perfect sense, right? If you're going to write a book, you don't say, I'm going to write a book. You do, but then you work backwards. Dawn has a very helpful tip here from her teaching days about lesson planning, which I think probably would be better if you explained, but it works perfectly for eating the elephant.
Yes. So in education, I was in education for a while. And so we went through several iterations of you teach this way, you teach that way, you teach this way. And one of the things that became very popular towards the end of my career in education, I believe it was called Learning by Design. I don't remember the exact name, but basically it's you begin your lesson planning with thinking, this is what I want my kids to know by the end. And so, or this is what I want them to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And so if I want them to be able to stand up and give a speech, then I work backwards. So in order for them to be able to stand up and give a speech, well, first then they're going to need to write a speech. Well, before they can write the speech, then we've got to learn about this type of rhetoric. And before we can learn about this type of rhetoric, I'm going to give them these type of examples. So you can do that with laying out your goals for a book. If your goal is, I'm going to write a book, and then you think to yourself, I want to write a book in 6 months. Well, then you work backwards of, that means that I have to do this many chapters, and that means this many words per day. That means, and you set up your checkpoints.
Yeah. And I think look at where you want to be, talking about that stuff that we just covered, the indie traditional, what is your deadline? Why is that your deadline? Once you have that in mind, then you kind of have to do some math if you want to figure it all out. How much time do you have? How much can you write in a day? What's realistic? Not, what's I'm going to write 7 days a week, write 10,000 words a day. You have to be gentle with yourself and remember that you actually want to achieve the goal. So set it in a way that you actually can achieve it. And if that means you write 500 words a day, 3 days a week, that's what you do. So do your math. Your book is going to be 65,000 words. Divide that by the 1,500 you're going to write every week. And that'll tell you how many weeks it will take you to get your first draft, right? And then you guys get it. You just make it small. So your goal isn't to write a book. It's to write 1,500 words a week for X number of weeks, right?
And I will say one of the resources we've listed is Sarah Cannon's HB90 method. And one of the things that was very eye-opening for me whenever I took that class is one of the things she has you do is lay out the days in the quarter and go through and mark off and figure out how many days do you actually have to work.
Right.
And then you also need to build you in a day where I don't feel good, or a day where I suddenly have a kid with 102 fever and they won't get off the couch next to me, so I cannot write that sex scene, you know? And so I think looking at it that way, that's where we're talking about the realistic goals.
Right. Because as I said, goals are, your goal is to hit your goals, not just to have these big ideas, right? So breaking them down, and it's hard. It's really hard. That whole picking the days that you're going to work thing, I pretty much looked at the calendar and was like, well, every day. And then I was like, okay, but let's be realistic. Like, we go skiing a few days a month in the wintertime, and like every now and then there's a day where I just don't really feel like it. And so it was really hard to admit that to myself, and because I think I look at myself and think I have this ridiculous work ethic and I'm so productive and blah, blah, blah. And I'm not. I'm human like everyone else, and I don't produce that much. I just think I can. And when I really looked at it, it was surprising how many days I needed to mark off and set aside. And then that gave me a much more realistic view of what I can actually accomplish every week. And so on the other side of all that, the goals that I ended up setting for myself this quarter are so much smaller. Not that they're not big, good goals, but they're so much more reasonable than the ones that I was previously setting and then not hitting, because I was like, oh, I'll write 3 books this quarter. I didn't stop to think how long, how many words, all the math. I just it was just this nebulous idea, and that's not the way to get things done, as it turns out. So,
well, and you have to, like you said, your goal is to make your goal. And so if you set it so high that you're never making it, you're discouraged before you even start. Now,
right. And there's a certain amount of morale busting that happens if that happens over and over again, to the point where you're like, I guess I'm not going to write a book. It's too hard.
Now, the other side of that is you don't want to set it so low that you don't feel like you're accomplishing anything. You got to find that medium part there. And so when we were talking,
Sarah said set a low, medium, and high goal. So like if you're setting a word count goal, she would put like 500 would be her like must hit. 1,000 would be her like, ooh, good. And 1,500 would be her like, yay, really good. So you have flexibility.
Yeah. And I think that's important. And so if we're looking at moving forward, where you take your overarching goal of I'm going to write the book, you break it down as to how much time do I actually have to do this? And then you start setting your mini goals, like you said, of this many words a day, or I'm going to have, and sometimes depending on your schedule, this is where what works for somebody else may not always work for you. And you've got to figure out what works for you. Is some people thrive on that daily goal. They thrive on I'm writing 500 words today or whatever. Mm-hmm. Some people, they need a week goal, because there may be one day where they write 15 words and then they think about things for a little bit, and then a day later they write 3,000. Right. So you've got to adjust to that. Some people, the goal doesn't have to be word count. It can be hours.
Or sprints, or And I think for some people too, feeling like they're boxed in by a daily goal is overwhelming and takes the fun out of it. And so, I think for people like that, who like, maybe my goal this week is to write 5,000 words, but I can spread it out however I want to as the week rolls ahead, as long as you don't get to Sunday and figure out that you wrote 1 word,
Right. And Sunday you're typing out, 4,999 words.
Yeah. So here's how all the parallelism comes back. I love it when there's like a parallel scene at the beginning and the end. So set your goals and be true to your process when you set your goals. If you know you'd like that kind of flexibility, then honor that when you set your goals.
Yes. And so you got to establish some deadlines. And we have a question from Julie that we need to get to here in a second. Okay. We talked about setting the goals and making them measurable.
Yes,
that
very
you
important.
yes, you need to have something that you can tangibly, not just I'm going to tell a story, not I'm going to write the book, but I'm going to have X number of chapters, or I'm going to have this number of words, or I'm going to spend this amount of time working on my book this week. You've got to have something that you could measure, that you could write it down. That's an education thing too. Can I check off, yes, this goal was met or not?
Right.
So, which is also works for your character goals, but that's a whole other video. So then you start setting your deadlines. And this is where things get a little tricky because Julie asked, how do you decide on a release date?
Well, so if it's your first book, you don't. You write the book. Focus on that.
Yes. That is step one.
Yes. If you have written a few books, and I don't mean to be glib either. I'll explain a little bit more if it's your first book about how to choose a deadline, or a release date rather. If you have already released a few books and you're kind of, pumping along in your process, you work backwards basically. And you may choose a release date based on any number of factors. It could be because you want to release a book every 4 months. It could be because you want to keep the Amazon cliff from dropping. And so you need to release a book every 90 days. It could be that you want to finish this series as soon as possible because you have a 6-book series that you're going to rapid release starting in August, and you may know that like I'm writing a Christmas book, so I need to get that out in November, or I'm writing a 4th of July book. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. And there's also a lot of talk about when is a good idea to release a book, when is not a good idea to release a book. For instance, we had an election this year, and there were a lot of people very hesitant to release in October, November, because they feared that would, all the advertising would be super expensive because of all the political advertising going on, and B, people would be too distracted to care that Delancey Stewart has a new book out. I don't know if anyone has really looked backwards to see if that actually did impact book sales at all or release success, but
I know I have clients who released in January who were not pleased.
January has been rough, man.
Who normally do extremely well and who have not been pleased because they feel like a lot of the world events impacted people watching the news rather than buying books, or the fear that was involved in there making people hold on to their money rather than buying books. So there was I do know that I have some, I guess, anecdotal, I don't know if that's the right word for it, data on that I know of at least a couple of clients who were not thrilled with their January releases. Well,
I didn't release in January, but just backlist sales have been kind of blah for me, at least. But so then, okay, so if you have released a few books and you kind of know your process and you know that it takes you X number of weeks to write a book, or months or years, then you know that your editing process is going to take X number of weeks, months. And then you know that your formatting process takes X number of weeks, months, hopefully not months. And then you need to leave yourself a few days to get everything up on all the retailers or at Amazon or however you're going to do it. You need to get your covers done. So hopefully you're booking with a designer and talking about that's the other thing. All of these professionals that you're going to need to work with have other clients and other work. So you've got to work yourself into their schedule. Dawn and I are usually booked up 3 to 4 months in advance. So that's something to keep in mind. Most editors, I think, have similar schedules, maybe not as busy, maybe busier. And then cover designers, I know, often have a couple months backlog as well. So your release date may be totally influenced not by how fast you write the book, but by how long it takes to get edited and to get your cover done and to get a promo tour if you're going to do one and all of that stuff booked in. So that's why you want to think ahead. But if it's a first book, I would highly suggest not locking yourself into any release dates. Get through all the processes first, make sure that your product is what you want it to be, and then worry about booking a promo tour and getting it pre-ordered up and all that kind of stuff. It's not going to hurt you to wait 3 months to release a book, but it will hurt you if you release a book 3 months early. Ready. Yeah. Or if you decide to forego editing or a professional cover because you already put it up for a pre-order and you have to meet that date. Also, Amazon will forgive you one time. I don't know about the other retailers. Well, they'll forgive you, but they won't let you put up a pre-order for a year.
So
Unless
if you're
ask
looking
really,
at
really nice. One time they let me do it.
So when you need that script, Nancy can provide for you what you need to say to them. So if you're looking at a first book, I think you're better set. What I'm hearing Nancy say is you are better set picking a deadline for when you want your book done. Of I'm going to have the book done here, and then I'm going to start my editing process. And I would say the hardest part of the editing process for a brand new writer for the first book is usually going to be the developmental editing, which is the part that I do, because that's when you're going to have, okay, here's all the things that you don't know. Here's all of the craft things that you haven't had a chance to have experience with. Go back and fix those. Then you're going to send them to a copy editor. So when you're laying out that editing schedule, you want to leave yourself space between those edits to take care of them.
Yeah, and don't book your edits back to back to back. Even, I mean, we have people that give themselves a week, and I am always kind of like, how is this going to be when it gets to me? Because I don't think that that's long enough to process developmental editing feedback and think about how you want to fix your book and then get it all done, unless you didn't have any feedback, which is impossible, because Dawn will always leave 30,000 little comments in the margins, thoughts, feelings, emotions.
I may be an over commenter. I'm sorry. It's okay. It's just my process, and we honor that. So.
No, it's helpful. And I did a developmental edit recently. I told you about, I felt like I was channeling you because I kept writing it. And what I had to tell her was, so these are just suggestions of places where you could explore feelings, thoughts, emotions. You don't have to do it every single time I put the comment there, because that was the only way I could make myself feel better about how often Dawn has to put it in my manuscripts.
Yeah, it's just suggestions. It's just suggestions. We need to celebrate that Kate says her next release is February 15th.
Yay.
So that'll be a good day, because everybody's done with Valentine's Day and tired of each other, so they'll be ready to sit back and read.
Aren't we already tired of each other? We've all been together in these little tiny houses for so long.
There's been a lot of togetherness. That's
why I'm being serenaded in the morning with chicken commercials. And
okay, so we have some
their minds. Sorry,
we have some important tips. So we've got some important tips, and then I've got a list of things that are okay in your process. So do we want to do the important planning tips first, or do the things that are okay in your process first?
I think that things that are okay in your process, because that kind of goes into those rules that we all think are absolutely written in stone that totally don't even exist.
So here's the things that are okay list that I came up with. Things that are okay. It is okay to edit as you go. It is okay to not edit as you go. It is okay to write linearly, meaning you're writing the scenes in the order that they happen. It's okay to write the scenes as they come to you and skip around and then bridge them all back together later. It's okay to write every day. It's okay to not write every day. It is okay to write in first person or third person. The second person thing, I'm still not getting the hang of, but I've heard it can work. It's okay to write in present tense. It's okay to write in past tense. And it's okay to write in layers. And this is something we'll explain a little bit more on a future show. But that's basically where you might write a scene where you write all dialogue. And then you go back the next time and you add in some of those emotions, thoughts, and reactions. And then you go back in and you add in action beats and descriptions, that kind of thing. It is also okay to use dictation instead of typing. It's that comes up sometimes. And it's kind of that whole, audio, listening to an audiobook isn't really reading, which it is. You are still reading if you're listening to an audiobook. But you're still typing, or you're still writing if you are speaking instead of typing. So those are my it's okay list.
So it's all okay. As long as it's all okay. Yeah.
Yes.
If you feel good about it, then it's okay.
As long as your process doesn't involve sacrificing a chicken and full moon and, dancing naked in the street, it's pretty much going to be all right.
And if it does, that's probably okay too.
Just make sure nobody's videoing it. That's probably, you just don't want to end up on TikTok. I think that's the main thing there.
It's true.
So tell us your tips.
I've got that too, some okays, because this is something like more and more in all the author groups and stuff that I run around in on Facebook. there's so many authors who are doing great, who you know their names, who are like, I always feel like I'm so behind. Do I have to join TikTok? Do I need an Instagram? Do I have to do this? Like, it's okay to not do all that stuff. It's okay to have the career that you have instead of having to feel like, okay, well, so-and-so is on TikTok now. I guess I need to be on TikTok. You don't have to be on TikTok. It's okay. And I'm saying this for my own benefit because,
yes,
God, I don't want to be on TikTok. Okay, I feel better. Important tips. Well, here's one that I know you firmly believe in, and my husband always tries to get me to believe in. Give yourself rewards for meeting those goals, for hitting milestones. So
even
you
if
don't
it's
have
just a little.
it doesn't have to be a bottle of Dom, but like one of those little tiny Ben and Jerry's ice cream cups every time you hit your word count for the week or something. Or for God's sake, eat a pint. I eat a whole pint. It's not a crime.
Well, and it can be stickers. Like we all know that I'm super into my paper planners and I love all my stickers and my washi tape. So you can get you a sticker that's like, yay, I did it. Give yourself a gold star. Celebrate those little milestones.
Yeah, whatever is meaningful to you, that is what you should celebrate with. Except, are you annoyed because I'm jumping around?
No.
I'm not going in order. But I like this one too. Accept what's out of your control.
That's a huge one.
If you take Sarah Cannon's class, one of the things that she says is that you should I can't remember if it's goals, I think it is, that are slightly out of your control, but that you can impact. So for a big one that I think a lot of people that take that class set is a financial or a monetary goal, for how much income they want their books to generate month by month or whatever. And in some ways that is in your control, but in a lot of ways that's really out of your control. So be careful, I guess. I'm not going to say don't set goals like that. I think that there's some woo that goes into this. Some people have this idea that if you put it out there, it will happen, the whole affirmation idea. And there's some truth to it. I think it's more about what you believe than about influencing the universe in any certain way. But just accept that not everything is something that you can actually control by setting goals and working your plan. Did you have anything more uplifting to say about that? That's a little...
Well, I think that comes from also celebrating the things that are in your control. Like if you do everything you can and this book still doesn't do well, you have to look back on the fact of, well, I'm ahead of all of these other people who have always said they were going to write a book and they've never even opened a Word doc. So you have to celebrate that too.
Yeah. And I think too, this kind of goes with give yourself some wiggle room, but you can't plan for your kid getting sick or for a car accident or for any of those horrible things that happen in our lives, or even the great things that interrupt your day to day. So, be gentle with yourselves. I mean, be a taskmaster. Make sure that you are getting done the things that are going to be meaningful to you so that you can be proud of yourself and get your stickers in your planner. But also, treat yourself the way you would treat one of your children. And not the yelling and spanking part maybe, but the accepting that not everything is going to go exactly the way you plan it all the time. And that is okay. Right.
One thing I do want to say about the things that are within your control, and this is just random PSA, back up your work.
Oh my God.
Because
yes.
Like you were saying, you can't control certain things. You can't control a computer crash.
Or your laptop getting stolen. Do you remember that whole situation? Scary stuff.
Well, or just general, I was working the other day and our electricity randomly went off and I lost an hour's worth of edits because I hadn't been saving after every sentence like I normally do. So back up your work, back up your work, back up your work.
Yeah. And in two places, preferably.
Yes.
Like I use
one of your goals.
I save all of my files on Dropbox. I also back up my Time Machine, because I'm on a Mac, to an external hard drive. And that has still failed, that process. I lost half of my bookkeeping spreadsheet in 2020. And I don't really know why or how, but it was the single most frustrating, because I'm not a good accountant to start with.
So all right. Back up your work.
Yes, please.
So that is our grand. We have made it through the January reset. We are ready to start moving on to talking about romance next month, which is going to be a blast. I'm so excited about that. That's going to be so much fun.
Yes, I'm excited about the romance.
Other things we have coming up.
Dawn has a new class coming.
I have a new class that should launch, hopefully, if technology will cooperate with me, and if I can have a day where I can actually record all the voice stuff that needs to go with it without a dog barking or a kid walking through. My launch on Monday, and it is Story Fuel, propelling your plot with conflict, stakes, and tension.
Cool. Conflict, stakes, and tension. We've talked a lot about that stuff.
It's my favorite thing, other than story structure.
Okay, that will be awesome. The newsletter went out. We announced a winner. We have a new giveaway, so we've already kind of mentioned that. And I think importantly, because we have been talking about so many things that have to do with mindset and structuring your life kind of to succeed, if you need help with any of this stuff, I mean, we've offered, if you got the newsletter, there's a ton of productivity resources there. But Dawn and I are happy to chat. And we both have coaching available. If you go to our Teachable site or just go to Evident Inc., it's all at the top menu bar there. Book a coaching session and just, I'll spend an hour listening to how you don't know how to set a goal and trying to help you do it if you want. That's what we're here for. So don't be afraid to reach out.
And as always, thank you so much for those of you who show up every week and hang out with us. We are glad you are here.
Yes, it's very fun to see you guys. And thank you to those who watch later on YouTube or on Facebook. I've heard from a lot of you as well. So appreciate your time and always appreciate feedback too. All right, guys, have a great weekend. See you later.